Hello and welcome to this very special podcast of Pipeline to Profitability. I'm Alan Ferguson, and today we have the one and only Shreya. Shreya is a service sales expert at Service MVP. Shreya's background is in HVAC as a comfort advisor and was trained by the legendary Joe Crisara in the field. There she discovered her passion for the trades and helping find the success she found while using Service MVP's process to create a new culture, leading to exponential growth and results. Shreya is now a $5 million a year salesperson, and I'm wowed by that. And all this while being 23. So welcome to the podcast, Shreya.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
My absolute pleasure. So I'd like to explore your journey and how you have become $5 million salesperson is very impressive, but I'd love to know more about a little bit about your journey, a little bit about you, how you got there, and what's happening. What are you doing to help the industry?
Awesome. Yeah, I can go through that. So how did I get to 5 mil is the question.
Yeah, one of.
Okay, one of. So I'll answer that first because it's actually, I think that one is a little bit more simple than some people might expect when they ask me that. I believe in focusing on a process and really learning that process and tuning into it rather than getting too, I used to get too messy with it. I would read a million books and I would implement way too many things. And it actually resulted in me talking too much on a call because I was trying to prove how smart and educated I was. With Joe, what I loved about his process is it's basically all of those books I ever read in one process that's already been laid out for me that I trust, so just trust the process where I focus on this one, the science and psychology of asking these types of questions. And really something special about Joe that made me fall in love with the process. And I believe this is the reason why it was the most effective for me is because of the emotional intelligence behind the process has to absolutely be there. Where one of the rules that he gave me is you have to be genuine. Great salespeople are genuine and honest. They're not exaggerating. They're not liars, so everything you think about that is untrue. And I want you to get that in your head. And that's really why I fell in love with it, because that's like Zig Ziglar-esque, you could say, is it's genuine and it's ethical sales. So I've just really never stopped retaining and advancing my learning in this specific process. I don't rest on my laurels and just be like, oh, well, I just am super charismatic. I'm a natural salesperson. I believe sales is a learned skill that requires constant training, kind of thing. So that's really how I've gotten there, if that answers your question. All right.
I have to agree with you 100%. Now, down under, we trained a lot of technicians to become salespeople, and this is a very interesting story. And you will have you'll probably concur with this with your experience working with tradespeople. I mean, I originally learnt through Tech Daddy, Charlie Greer, because he actually, I think 20 years ago when I reached out, he had a product that he could, he shipped some discs down under, and we learnt from that. Prior to that, I had some time and experience with, I'd already, I think, connected with Joe Crisara and some of the greats in the industry. What I found with sales is, and I know you'll have an answer to this, is not everyone in my company wanted to do sales. And it's only just in the last probably 10 years that I've learned through my mentor, Joe Cunningham, and you know, as I said, I've followed Joe Crisara for many years as well, is they don't want to sell, don't sell. Just have a process, put the systems in place, and make sure you offer the customer options. So with that and tradespeople resisting sales, what's your advice on that, Shreya?
That's funny. I probably talk about this subject every day for the last 2 years. It's really the main thing. And like, how do you train technicians? How do you train people in the trades? And really, that is another reason why I fell in love with it. It's sales for technicians that hate sales, and it's really just great service. That's actually how we start training. We start with more mindset training, and then we get into here's exactly what you do and what you say and why you say it. But we start with, why are they so scared to offer a premium option to somebody? You know, it's usually because of their own views on money and their own family type of thing. Why do they think it's something that's mean to do to offer solutions to problems? So we just make them understand that that's what sales is offering solutions to people's problems, which is a kind thing to do, and helping them come to a conclusion about it, because the human brain wants to do one of two things. It wants to avoid making a decision, or it wants a shortcut to make a decision. We're the shortcut. That's what sales is. And once they understand that, especially coming from somebody that's been in the attic, it's very important too. They're being taught by another person in the trade so that they can relate with. They start to get actually enthusiastic about training, to where they're voluntarily doing role plays when nobody's asking them to do it outside in the morning in their trucks. And that was my experience with my techs, is I would walk outside. What are you guys doing? They're role playing the benchmark sheet by themselves and holding each other accountable. It becomes a part of the culture. They just don't understand what sales is and why they're doing it, how it benefits them, and how it's actually a really kind thing to do. And it's bad service to not do it.
100%. Yeah, look, when you explain it like that, it does make sense to me. And you know, you've mentioned in a couple of times having a process, and you know, that's one thing I learned from all of my trainers, and it's not just Joe Cunningham and Charlie Greer and Kenny Chapman and Mark Madison, and the list goes on, but following the greats, you know, the Zig Ziglars, and you know, I've met some really wow trainers over the years, and to me it's all the same, but it's dressed just differently. But one of the things that I've also discovered, that when it comes to sales, we as the trainers, and you're a trainer now from being an actual salesperson, I'm presuming that's your role now with Joe. You train others on selling. The very first thing I used to tell my team is stop friggin' selling. Like, just and look, this is one of the things in the training that I do is you can't sell a solution to a problem a customer doesn't know they have. And
yes,
that's another area that we push really hard, and that's I suppose down under, I'm probably the king of helping contractors to find things that really do need to be fixed. And a couple of things that you said that really do hone in on me: don't ever sell something to anyone that they're not going to benefit from, or it's going to, you know, give them a financial value. So maybe we might talk about that a little bit, about how to help our technicians to actually find more and sell more.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the problem, because that's something that Joe told me. Finding the problem is almost as important, if not more important, than even finding the solution. is doing a full diagnosis on every appointment, and then having the creativity to build those jobs to where before the training, I would go into a home. I do probably now looking back half a diagnosis. It wasn't very intricate. I didn't see how dirty the ducts are. I didn't see if the return was right or the CFM, matched the system and the size of the return. There's a lot of details that I could have went into that I was uneducated on. And Joe really taught me how to add that to my process because it's the right thing to do. Because it's more professional as a technician and as a comfort advisor to do a full diagnosis and then present that diagnosis, right? And connect it to how that affects them in their life, their safety and health. And it's all 100% true. He said, you don't need to exaggerate a diagnosis if you do a good diagnosis. You should never need to do that, right? You should never need to lie if you know how to actually do one, because as we know, you go into most homes, I mean, their tables are covered in fiberglass and dead skin, and they have no idea and nobody's ever told them. So it's honesty even when it's not popular, giving a real honest diagnosis, but always having those solutions ready right after the diagnosis. The creating dissonance, right? So you're saying a factual diagnosis on the system, but you always have the solutions ready right then and there. I'm not in the attic looking at the ducts, yelling down to the customer, oh, these look pretty bad. I'm just like, well, let me just finish my diagnosis and I'll give you all the information at the end, right? That sort of thing. So yeah, finding problems just as important as finding solutions. And then not being scared to build those solutions to solve all of the problems. That's something very common that I see is their diagnosis says all this stuff, all these problems. Their solutions are not solving all of those problems because the technician is scared of how big of an investment it is. The solution.
You've touched on another topic that we're going to dive into is salesman's fear of price. How much does that play on, because I learned when we brought flat rate pricing to Australia around 2005. There was another company that was doing it, but not really doing it that well. We brought flat rate pricing to Australia, implemented in our business, and my best sales guy, once we actually got going, I found that my best sales guy had a ceiling of about $5,000. So he said, Alan, I'm good with selling anything up to $5,000, but once it gets past that, will you be able to help me? And so I did. But how important is it in the mindset? And I did say to you before we started that I'd like to dive into the mindset and the psychology a little bit of sales. So salesman has a price ceiling, or he has a problem with price. How do you overcome that when you're training sales technicians?
It's a good question because it's the first thing we cover in training. We make sure we cover it first and foremost and start with that. Is Joe would call that leave your mother in the truck. Because psychologically, a lot of those price objections that the technician has against his own pricing comes from his or her childhood, where how they grew up with money, they're putting that on the clients, right? And they're letting it affect their solutions. So we have them even answer a questionnaire about their own relationship with money to see where they're at. And it always matches up with how they present solutions or how comfortable or uncomfortable they are. I had the same problem personally when I took that questionnaire when I was in total immersion with Joe. And I realized that because of my childhood and the way I saw money as sort of like a hoarder or a very overly frugal, maybe cheap type of relationship with investments, that's something that one even just being in the class changes a lot of the mindset, because it just has to make sense of, oh, that does make sense to get it, because you have to sell it to the technician just like you would the client. Put them in the client's shoes and give them a different perspective. And then it does get much deeper than that. When if I'm talking to a technician right now and a technician is listening, I would say that, for example, in the car business, a rule we have is you buy whatever you're selling, no matter how high the investment. You must actually use what you're selling, because sales is a transference of feeling. You have to believe what you're selling. People know the difference. And there's a lot of science behind that you could have two speakers. This is in Talk Like TED, a book about TED Talks, where you could have two speakers, seemingly, you know, they both have conviction in what they're talking about. But if you read the brain waves of the listeners, they know which one is telling the truth and which one there's something a little off there, and they're not totally bought in. So there's personal work with that, of course. Is becoming a premium client has made me a better salesperson. I became now I'm a very, very premium client, and it's really easy for me to come to a decision about investments. If I know all the information, I can almost instantly make a decision on it. And if it saves me time, you know, then I'll invest whatever I need to in that. So I've totally changed the way that I live life with money myself, is the deeper way of that objection. But you really, if you own a company, if you're a technician, there is a way to overcome that objection of the technicians. It's a reconditioning of the mind, which is what training is. It's reconditioning.
Love it. I noticed a comment from our mutual friend Ken Goodrich. I'm sure you know Ken.
Yes.
He put up on in one of the groups, and I have to say, as much as I hate Facebook, I love the groups. I think they're the most powerful way to share information. And one of the posts that Ken put up, I think it was in the last few days, was about salespeople not agreeing with the price and wanting to adjust the price. Now, my belief, and I'm sure, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. If a salesperson or a technician does not believe in the price, my view is they don't believe in the company. And it was one of my business partners many years ago. We had a leadership company, and Peter said to me, Alan, my first job when I left school, I was working for a cigarette tobacco company. He said, and I didn't smoke and I couldn't sell cigarettes for shit. It's because I didn't believe in the product. But that's different to the price. But my view, and I'd love yours, Shreya, is when a technician doesn't believe in the price, they don't believe in the company.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I've experienced that, where if there's installation problems, I don't believe in the effectiveness of the team that's going to come after I sell it. I have some internal problems there with selling that job, you know, and I almost am thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't sell this big job because my install team can't handle it. I've definitely, if I'm going to be completely honest, have had those thoughts in the field before, but ended up just creating a solution with a process for something like that. But I would agree with that. I think also, though, you think of, you know, what Ken said is absolutely true, because most technicians and even salespeople, comfort advisors, are not trained salespeople, right? But we expect the results of a professional salesperson. So there's that as well. Like, we expect them to be multi-million-dollar salespeople and don't give them the service of a process or training. So that is the gap that I see there, is you can't really blame somebody for their performance or how they're dealing with projects if you have not offered the training to overcome that when they onboard at the company. So it's the balance of accountability there of the owner and that technician, right? Because most techs are willing, I can meet with any tech, as cynical as you can think of, they go to a training and they're not that way anymore. I think everything comes down to training. Since he posted that, I've gotten multiple text messages from people quoting him on, what did he call it? He called it like bidding men, and he had different phrases for like an anti-salesperson. That was really, really accurate. And I've already got like 3 texts like, I think my salespeople are not salespeople, they're bidding men, and I need help with this.
Order takers.
Order takers, right.
So I just want to jump in on that, and like everything that I've done down under was nothing was original, and I haven't got an original bone in my body. I just see what successful people are doing, and I copy them, and I try to be respectful of all the greats, because the last thing you want to be known for is plagiarism, and I'm so against anything that, taking something from someone else and claiming it's your own. And I actually had a chat I had a Zoom call with Joe Crisara a few months back, and there was a phrase that I have been using about building trust, and I always suspected it was from Uncle Joe. And I said, Joe, do you mind if I use this phrase? He said, no, Alan, that's fine. Because, whether Joe made the phrase up or not, or whether he got it from one of the greats, the Zig Ziglars, the Tom Hopkins, I'm not too sure. But it's always good to be respectful in that area. So one thing that we would do, Shreya, when we had a technician that didn't believe in the price, we would get them. And I did a lot of training, not just I did goal setting training, I did financial training. But one of the things that we found really important was to show, we made up a pie chart which showed where the money goes. So for every $100, $10 would go to marketing, $20 would go to salaries in the field, $15 for over, and so we would show the technician that out of, when a company like ours, we were doing like 2,000 service calls a month, and we were turning over a lot of money, and the guys are thinking that 90% of that goes into Alan's pocket and 10% goes into theirs. Right. So that was how we did it. We had to educate them and show them where the money went and why. Most companies keep about between 10 and 15 cents in the dollar. And there's a lot of companies that don't keep that much. So how do you overcome that one when someone doesn't believe in the price?
That, first of all, I love that process. It's education, right? So you're educating them, which is such a great service to give technicians, because, ignorance through misunderstanding, it comes down to the same things, with 2 different solutions, right? Training, and that's also training. It's just more education-based training. It's like, here's how you understand money. And which is funny that is, we don't go through pie charts and stuff like that. I feel like that is so genius. And I respect that you do that service for technicians to help them understand finances more. For example, when a client asks for an invoice, that's like the same concept of a technician not believing in the price, is like looking at every little part. Well, if the parts cost this, why does the job cost this? Yes, it's because we are a premium service company. The gas and the truck that gets you there, the phones that are answered, right? The calls on Christmas, is like, you have to think of all of what goes into service, the marketing, like you're saying. This is something that actually is an objection handle to a client as well as a technician when we're talking about, switching over the views on investments and believing in your own jobs, to where I would have technicians, the highest thing they would offer is like $6,000. Then they would start offering 14 grand, and that's in repairs, right? That became the norm for them. One, through practice, there's that too, where role play is very important, being repetitive, Also, I would do a lot of ride-alongs with them. So I would make sure that, yeah, this is the best solution for this family to offer. It solves all their problems. It just happens to be 18 grand. So we're going to offer this right now. And I'd watch them offer it and they're nervous, but they do it, and they do it over and over again until they get used to something like that, where they can handle that. Same with me. My premium jobs were 30,000, and then they became 60,000 because I started to see more and more problems and more solutions with training and experience. It just, over time, I think the consistency with training is really important, and practice over and over again to get comfortable with doing something like that. But that's very important, because technicians don't even understand their own pay plans most of the time, which is a huge issue, let alone how the finances behind a job that makes it worth that much so that they can believe in it. So I love that you do that.
Another one that I used to use, and I used to like to have a bit of fun with the guys, especially I used to do ride-alongs myself, not as many. I found that when, as the owner, doing the ride-alongs with the techs, they'd get really nervous, and they used to do a lot better without me there. But the goal for me was just so I can get a better understanding of how they're actually running the call, and then mentor them and coach them back in the classroom. But look, the other thing about, I mean, we both are training technicians, and have been doing it for quite a few years, as you have, Shreya. But the other thing too is with technicians, and I want to go back to the Ken Goodrich comment, which got both of our attention, right? And it sort of stuck with me, because I've known Ken for about 10 years now, and I know he's got a fantastic sense of humor, and he loves stuff like that. But one of the things, I would get a phone call from a technician in the field, on a big, it might be a $50,000 job. And most of the big jobs for us, we did air conditioning, and we did, like, I think the biggest air conditioning job I sold was probably about 60,000. And I'm not an air conditioning tech, I'm actually a plumber. But we used to do drain jobs up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I had a technician. Actually, no, I've had quite a few technicians would call in and say, look, the customer doesn't want to go ahead. It's too expensive. How can we drop the price? And dropping the price is an interesting one. And I have a very firm belief, and I train my coaching clients, that you can drop the price if you know your numbers. I mean, if you can get a better buy price on the goods, you can drop your price. Can the job be done in a lesser amount of time? You can drop the price. But if you can't get a better buy price on the parts, and if you can't drop the labor, I would say, look, you're on commission, right? So let's say it's 5% or 10%. We can drop that, and you can miss your commission, and we can drop the price that way. Oh no, I don't want to drop my earnings. Well, you're expecting the company to drop theirs. So maybe you might like to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, how many times have you, if you're in front of a client and they ask for a discount, for example, and you actually discount it, and they don't get the job because you failed the test? I don't discount. I don't believe in discounts, period, because that means once again, it goes back to, I don't believe in the job. Plus there's options: premium, mid-range, and economy. So usually when people ask for a discount, it's on premium and mid-range. It's because they want something a little higher end, but they want to negotiate it down. It's more rarely on the economy statistically. So I would just say, well, just look at the lower options then. Look at the economy, right? There's options for that reason. No, I like that one. Okay, well, we'd have to cut corners on the job in order to, and that's why the investment is what it is. So what would you like to cut corners on? Safety, health? No, I want all these things. So you pretty much just go back to, and then what should we do? I do not discount it. I just remind them what the investment is for, and it's for service. We're not offering a cookie cutter Goodman system that the other company offered. We're a premium company, and really what people are paying for is the service. And so I focus on the service rather than the parts, bring it back to that subject to train the technician and the client over and over again why we're doing this. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do it. It's actually, I feel like it's a simple solution to a complicated problem that I've had for a really long time, that when I discovered, oh man, actually when I discount it, it's like a test that I'm failing with the client and with the technician. It's reaffirming that, yeah, you're right, it's worth less. No, it's not. It's not worth less. Right?
I agree with you 100%. And I might have given you the wrong impression. I didn't like to discount ever. And I learned that.
Oh, I know what you mean. You mean on the back end.
Yeah. So
yeah,
this was more of an exercise to my technician. I'd say, well, you drop your commission, we can drop the price. And they didn't have to drop the price. But what I found with the work that we did that worked really well, was removing something from the price. So let's say we were doing a big drainage job and we didn't do concreting. We would have to bring in concreter to reconcrete the road or whatever it was. So what I'd say to my technician, the customer wants a better price, we'll remove the concreting because we're not concreters anyway. We would have to bring someone in and mark it up, give that back to the client, and you've dropped the price, but you haven't actually removed any of the work that we're doing, which was, it always worked well. If you can remove something and reduce the price to something different, but don't cut your margins. So, look, it sounds like we're both well and truly on the same page with our approach to sales. And
totally.
And, you know, your passion to help the industry is my passion to help the industry. And I'm going to finish off the podcast because I've had a lot of fun. This has been really good.
Me too.
But I always finish off the podcast with what book you're reading at the moment. Have you got something that you would like to recommend our podcast listeners?
Yeah, I usually am reading 2 books at a time, but I'll be short. So the first one is an obvious one, I feel like, to most people, but it's taken me a while to actually read it. So Relentless by Tim Grover, right? So he trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, and it's really a very much a mindset book, but to the extreme. I think of like a David Goggins approach. Very intense book, but very educational for what goes behind the process to fuel you to do the process. And 2 is very much a stoicism book. I would think of more like philosophy, and that's As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. That one is pretty much a reiteration of what a lot of the books we read, which is autosuggestion, reconditioning of the subconscious mind, but also mixed in with stoicism and application in real life, which I really like that about that book as well. So those are the 2 that I'm reading right now that I really, really love.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I have to say that I've actually learned a lot from you today. So this has been great. And, you know, I tell everyone that asks me why you're doing the podcast is, and I'll give you the absolute honest truth here, is because I'm still learning, and no one has all the answers. And I get so much out of these podcasts just by the guests that I have on, and it helps me to become a better trainer. And yeah, I love it. So thank you again, Shreya.
Thank you. I've learned a lot from you as well. Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to catching up with you at an upcoming event, and we'll get to meet the legend Joe Crisara one day. Although we have spoken before and we've known each other for a while, and he's got such a good reputation in the business. And yeah, I look forward to that. And thank you. You have a fantastic day. And yeah, we'll Is there anything you'd like to close out with?
No, just thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm green, so I appreciate having me on. I try to stay humble about everything because I'm just a little baby compared to you guys, and I appreciate for being a predecessor with Joe and all those people, so I could be sitting here today. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Shreya. It's been fantastic. All right, this is me signing off on Pipeline to Profitability, proudly sponsored by Service Success Academy. Thanks again. See you, Shreya.